Dr. Amr Salama, welcome.
Yes. Welcome. How are you?
Oui, oui, je me suis connecté, ça a pris seulement que moi, on ne me voit pas. Là, j'entends.
Já estou conectado.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, hello, Eduardo.
Hello, how are you doing?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm connected. I'm well connected now.
That's great, great. Excellent.
Well, how are you, Eduardo?
I'm very fine, thank you. And you?
Nice to see you again.
Thanks. I'm very glad to see you again, indeed. You can use the chat box if you like to write your words of present yourselves.
Habituellement, ça peut venir, je ne sais pas pourquoi aujourd'hui c'est pas français. C'est automatique. Oui, c'est quoi?
I would like just to confirm that the colleagues of Council on Higher Education of Lesotho, they are online also ready. Thank you.
Je suis en train de voir. Oui, il n'y a pas de problème. C'est moi ma vidéo qui ne passe pas. Je sais pas si c'est quoi.
Are you all receiving well the sound? Do you have any issues with the sound? Is it okay? Clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Yes, the sound is all right.
Está bom som.
Yes, the sound is okay.
Sound is okay.
Ah, je n'ai pas mis le...
Bonjour.
Ça, voilà.
We will start in 1 minute. We have a very busy, agenda today, and so we will start very soon. As we always give 1 additional minute to participants.
Non, ils m'ont
additionnel aux participants pour qu'ils puissent se préparer pour ce webinaire.
Mais aos nossos participantes para se poderem preparar.
So let us then start, colleagues.
Chers collègues, nous allons commencer sans plus tarder.
So, dear colleagues, participants, a good day,
Chers
everybody.
participants,
Very good to see you
bonjour.
again after our
Je suis très
webinar
heureuse
2
de vous
weeks
revoir
ago.
après.
I am Eduarda Castelbranco, and I'm working with the thematic and content coordination of this project, developing the African Continental Qualification Framework. Welcome, everybody. We have a number of new countries and also new participants today, and we hope to continue this journey together. So this is the 4th webinar. We are already more or less halfway through our program of webinars this year. You have all received the agenda. You have also seen the link to the webpage with all the presentations already uploaded. You can use them afterwards as you like. For for a smooth interaction today, let us just remind a few rules of our Zoom webinar. So please mute your microphones for a smooth interaction, and use the chat box when you want to introduce yourself, say something, write questions, comments, and you can stay visible. You can stay visible with your cameras on. Please choose the language of your preferred channel of interpretation. It can be English, French, Portuguese. There is an icon that you can choose on your Zoom screen. So let us go then to our let us go through our agenda then. Today we have then four main topics in this first session. So the agenda, first of all, then very briefly remind the context of this webinar, since we have new participants with us. Then the third topic will be, as always, a recapitulation of main lessons learned from the third webinar, since this is an activity of learning. And then a very brief, very flash overview of the ACQF mapping study as it stands now, about to be completed. So you have all seen the agenda. You know that we are going to work until 16:40 on our time zone. So 2 hours 40 more or less of interactions. Our three main sessions and cases today are, first of all, Lesotho Qualifications Framework. Colleagues of the Council of Higher Education of Lesotho are going to lead us to introduce the experience of their rather new, revised LQF, the LQF. Then we have a session of questions and answers. Then immediately after, Bahrain National Qualifications Framework, and followed by the experience of a regional qualifications framework, which is the Arab Qualifications Framework. We will have, as always, time for views and discussions, and we will have the impressions of our discussant, who is Mr. Mamadou Sarr, professeur titulaire des universités et expert en assurance qualité du CAMES, quality assurance expert of CAMES as well. Questions and answers will be also possible. And finally, as always, this very short interactive joint assessment using Mentimeter. Very briefly, as always, on the context of this webinar. As you know, it is taking place in the framework of a project that is supporting the African Union Commission in developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework. This ACQF is an initiative of the AU, and the ACQF aims to be inclusive, receptive to innovation, open to stakeholders' contributions, good practice, and all this to reach this common, this combined set of the objectives, which are enhanced comparability, quality, transparency of qualifications, recognition of diplomas and certificates, mobility of learners, work in complementarity with national and regional qualifications frameworks in Africa, and promote cooperation and alignment between qualifications frameworks in Africa and worldwide. And the ACQF is then going to be an overarching framework against which national and regional frameworks and level descriptors can be calibrated. Obviously, the ACQF does not work in isolation. It is closely interconnected, interrelated, works in synergy with the AU ecosystem of policies, the most important overarching policy being the Agenda 2063. Let me just underline that in the case of the ACQF, the African Continental Education Strategy, or the African Education Strategy for Africa 2025 is fundamental. The ACQF will contribute to strategic objective 4 of this CISA strategy, CISA 2025. Very briefly also to remind the main components of this ACQF development project in this period until 2022. So you all know already these components. First of all, it is building an evidence base, and this is done through the mapping study that is going on in about to be completed. Then we are going immediately to start already in October, hopefully, inshallah, the analysis of options for the ACQF as a sustainable policy instrument. Then already the design development of the ACQF policy and technical documents supported by an action plan, common guidelines, as a website. And throughout all this period of 2.5 years, we will always have capacity development actions. And naturally, the one in which we are now, this peer learning, is part of this activity of capacity development, which aims to reinforce mutual learning between the countries, create a common view, common concepts, and finally, further on, also application via support to countries. And so this capacity development component of the project is exactly the context of this peer learning webinar. Just to remind that we had 2 phases. So this is the first phase in the year 2020. It's essentially an initial level of learning based on peer sharing of different experiences. Then the phase 2 in the next year and in 2022 is going to be a more advanced level. And hopefully we will then reach ACQF experts network for further sustainability. Let us also just very quickly remind this journey in which we are engaged since July 2020 until end of October 2020. So we started on the 2nd of July, we had already 6 cases, different cases, African and European cases in July. Then on the 10th of September, we had our 3rd webinar with the 3 additional cases, Mauritius qualifications framework, France and Portugal. And today, as I said already, Lesotho qualifications framework and Bahrain and Arab qualifications framework. Then in October, as you can see, we will have essentially African cases, Angola, Ghana, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Cabo Verde, and then South Africa in the last one, and 2 regional qualifications framework, the South African Development Community Qualifications Framework, and also East Africa Qualifications Framework for Higher Education. Today we are at the 4th webinar, so we are halfway. These are our 3 cases today, as already indicated. Thank you very much, Mr. Kobotlo, Director of Policy, Strategy and Information of the Council on Higher Education of Lesotho, for having accepted at rather short notice our invitation to share this experience, and also Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, General Director of Education and Training Quality Authority of Bahrain, who is going to present then the other 2 cases. But before we start with your substantial presentations, let us then move into the next chapter of this first session, which is the recapitulation of main learnings from the 3rd peer learning webinar of 10th of September. So to start, let us just very briefly have a look at this overview. You all have in your agendas the list of peer learning themes that we have proposed for this activity, for this peer learning program. And the question we are trying to ask and monitor all the time is, how well are Dear colleagues, please mute your microphones. S'il vous plaît, fermez vos microphones. Merci. So, with this scheme, what we just want to tell is that some of these themes, of these 9 themes that we have aligned here listed, are being covered very well, let's say, in a very consistent manner throughout all the webinars. So, for example, the theme on national qualifications frameworks in their context, the objectives, the important policy aims, the of evolution, the scope and type. This is always covered. And today again, we will have LQF and BQF talking very well about this topic. So the scope is always well covered throughout the workshops. One of the themes, however, for example, the theme related with recognition of prior learning or validation des acquis de l'expérience or recognition of competences and validation of competences, RVCC in Portuguese, has been less covered in the first and second, but very well in depth addressed, described in the third webinar by Mauritius, France, and Portugal. It was a very good contribution. So just not to take too much of your time, you can have a look further. And if you are very interested, for example, in knowing how the governance of NQFs is organized in the different countries, you can have a look at all the materials that have been so far shared throughout these previous 3 webinars. And today again, Lesotho, the Council on Higher Education and Bahrain Qualifications Framework are going to share a lot of interesting information about the governance of their NQF. So for those of you of the participants who are then very interested in how is it about developing and implementing the LQF, the NQF, you have also a lot of good, very relevant information in the previous presentations of the other countries. We continue very briefly to remind that we always start with this just reminder of key definitions, the definition of qualifications, and also another one on national qualifications framework. This is always important. Naturally, that in the literature, there are variations of this definition. We are using this. Many countries have more or less similar definitions. And this is our always very, let's say, complicated slide in which we try to sum up the most important features, characteristics of each of the cases analyzed and shared in the previous webinar. And this time, to try to be a little bit more straightforward in the comparison from case to case, what we did is the following. So you have Mauritius National Qualifications Framework, you have France and Portugal. In green font, green, you have all the common features between the 3. It looks like they had many common features if we just look at the green color on this slide. And the common features are, for example, they are all integrated, comprehensive national qualifications frameworks, all looking at parity of qualifications, different types, different strengths, different ways of acquisition. They all have, for example, a very strong development of their systems of recognition of prior learning or validation des acquis de l'expérience. This is quite fundamental, for example, in the case of France. It's a centerpiece of their national qualifications framework. No qualifications can be placed in the NQF in France if it cannot be obtained via recognition of prior learning, or VAE, as it is called in France. The same thing happens in Portugal and also in Mauritius, very strong development in Mauritius of the RPL system. This is very, very interesting, a very interesting trend. Another element, just very briefly, is the governance of qualifications and the qualifications framework. It is not only composed or let's say based on the role of the, for example, Mauritius Qualifications Authority, but there are also other important stakeholders involved. In the case of Mauritius, the Ministry of Education, Industry Training Advisory Committees, Registration Committee, Accreditation Committee, Quality Audit Panels. In the case of Portugal, we see that these sector councils for qualification are fundamental. Without the approval and analysis by these sector councils of qualifications, no qualification can be included in the national catalog of qualifications. And they are all referenced, all of them are referenced to regional qualifications frameworks. So in the case of Mauritius, it is aligned with the qualifications framework of SADC, so Southern African Development Community, and also referenced with the transnational qualifications framework. Furthermore, Mauritius maintains many international links with countries through memoranda of understandings. And finally, France and Portugal both have reference to the European qualifications framework. So this was just a very brief overview of the main features of these three frameworks that are mature frameworks. As you can see from the dates, they have been started already in 2003, the case of Mauritius, 1972, France, and 2007 in the case of Portugal. We always like also to highlight the questions, some questions and comments done by participants. And here we decided just to focus on one question, a major question asked by a participant from Sierra Leone. And this question is, how long does it take to build a robust NQF? How to make it happen at a faster pace? Are there any shortcuts? So this was the very fundamental question asked by a participant from Sierra Leone. Now let us also look at the discussant's views. And as you all remember, our discussant was Mr. Joe Samuels from South Africa. Joe Samuels, in his very inspiring presentation, noticed and underlined the role of policy learning, not policy borrowing. He said that learn from many diverse experiences is important. It's important to know better the experiences of French-speaking and Portuguese-speaking countries. He noticed also this important, let's say, highlight of the third webinar, is focus on RPL systems, recognition of prior learning, like when this is implemented countrywide as a mainstream policy and practice, important for inclusion. And then Joe also asked about the big challenges, the challenging environment in which we are all living now with the COVID-19, which is bad, but climate change will be even worse. So building back to what it was before is not the answer. We need to look forward with new reference points. And he gave as reference point the top skills 2030 that are proposed by the World Economic Forum, and said that these top skills could be used as references also for design of level descriptors and learning outcomes in our countries. He mentioned also that the creativity should not be at the end of a learning life or path, but right at the beginning. And naturally then green economy, jobs and skills, and ACQF was then the expectation to take up these challenges as a continent. Very quickly, our time is very short always. As always, we do this sort of interactive assessment. And we had 3 questions as always, and these are your own responses. So the first question was, which are the objectives of Mauritius National Qualifications Framework? And as you can see, comparability appears very high there, transparency, mobility, and particularly interesting, end of the jungle of qualifications that was at the beginning, the big challenge faced by the country in 2003 when the Mauritius Qualifications Authority was established. Question 2 was more of a technical question and an important one, because this was the first webinar in which we have really looked much more in depth at the issues of level descriptors. And we took then the example of the French qualifications framework that is totally new, was totally renovated, let's say, restructured and redone in 2019 through a new legal act. And the responses were correct. So knowledge, skills, responsibility, and autonomy. Finally, the third question was also quite interesting. It helped you, let's say, it helped us all make sense of the discussion of the day. And the question was, which were the top important elements of these 3 NQFs from the point of view of your country or institution? And these are then the responses you have voted for. So the most voted reply was, the NQF is not static. It can change, it can evolve. Then the second most voted one was, NQFs are comprehensive of all levels and types of qualifications. And the third most voted was the recognition of prior learning linked with the NQF. Now let us very, very quickly go through this, what I'm calling a very super rapid flash on the ACQF mapping study. The ACQF mapping study will very soon be complete, released, and then discussed. So by early October. So I mean the comprehensive report. Other reports are already available. So the aim of this mapping study was to take stock and analyze the state of play, current dynamics, things are changing, and perspectives of qualifications frameworks on the continent. It is important to look at commonalities, differences, challenges, opportunities as well, and the interfaces with the future continental qualifications framework. The scope was, like, of course, national level, but also the regional economic communities. Types of analysis that are part of the ACQF mapping are listed here. So, of course, an inception and methodology report, but then what is very important are these country reports. They are like working papers, living, they can be updated. The comprehensive mapping report that is coming up in 2 weeks, let's more or less. The synthesis report and infographic. Very briefly also about how this was, let's say, organized. So the mapping study was commissioned and conducted by JET Education Services via a competitive tender with very substantial inputs in terms of planning, review, analysis and drafting of the ACQF project itself. So the analytical framework consists basically of these 11 thematic areas or dimensions that are formulated in the terms of reference and in the ACQF scope of work document, which is the main planning document. And the areas are also listed. So starting, of course, with the legal and policy basis of NQFs, the governance of NQFs, type of governance, the vision, scope, structure of NQFs, quality assurance, then the use of learning outcomes being a fundamental central piece of principles of national qualifications frameworks, then types of credit systems, alignment with regional qualifications frameworks, the use and types of databases, registers of qualifications, then issues of costs and financing, and finally these 2 important questions, which are from one side dissemination and communication to end users, and then also the role of NQFs in supporting change at a national level in questions such as, for example, employability or the stock of qualified labor force. Again, I would like to underline that we did not use only one source of information, but a tripod of sources, let's say. So first of all, an online survey to which 33 countries have responded, and it was very good. Then the country technical visits to 10 countries and also 3 regional economic communities. And one of the countries could be then addressed via remote communication because of the COVID-19 restrictions didn't allow a physical visit. And desktop research. This was really fundamental to create a robust database of information. Finally, as you see, the point 4 there are the peer exchanges and sharing that are taking place throughout this year. And this has very much contributed to enrich and update information that has been used in the ACQF mapping study at country level and also the comprehensive report. Here, just for you to see all the countries that have participated, and a big thank you to all of the 33 countries that have responded to the online survey. Then you also see the country reports. They cover the countries listed in the second square or rectangle: Angola, Cameroon, Cape Verde, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Morocco, Mozambique, Senegal, South Africa, Togo, and then these three regional economic communities. The report on ECOWAS or CEDEAO also mentions CAMES and the LMD system. I wanted to underline this. Countries and regional economic communities that have been involved in the peer learning and updates and meetings are also here, as you can see, meetings with Eswatini, then Lesotho participating in this peer learning activity. As I said, this contributes very much to enrich the level of knowledge that is incorporated then in the mapping study. We have showed this the graph in previous webinars, but this time it is updated to 40 countries. So this is the overview of the, let's say, state of development and implementation of NQFs in 40 countries of the continent. And as you can see, we have then organized in 5, let's say, stages, going from a stage where the country has no NQF and no step yet to start developing one. And we have then identified 4 countries in this group. Then many countries are moving to the early thinking, moving to take steps to start developing. And this is was also a very interesting finding of the mapping study, the dynamics going from one stage to the other. So early thinking, 9 countries. Then we have 10 countries in the phase of development and consultation in different stages of development consultation. Some are more advanced. Then we have 15 countries which have adopted legal act and started implementation, and 2 countries in, let's say, advanced implementation. And this advanced implementation means that the country has already several years of experience with the NQF and even revised it. If we look only at those 17 countries that are in this green part of implementation, what we noticed is that, well, the majority of these 17 are located in the Southern Africa region, where the SADC qualifications framework is well established. So 11 out of these 17 are in this region. And 2 of the newest national qualifications frameworks are also located in SADC, Eswatini, approved in August 2020, and Lesotho, approved in June 2019. Other national qualifications in frameworks in implementation are listed also. They are not in the SADC region. Cape Verde in ECOWAS with 10 years of experience and lots of interesting developments and operationalization. Kenya with a strong progress since 2014. Morocco with the political validation of the NQF, new governance structure, quality assurance in higher education and TVET in development. Rwanda, which is advancing completion of the integrated NQF based on existing sector frameworks. Tunisia, Uganda. So these are the more or less very brief overview of those NQFs that are at the implementation stage. I said about dynamics, and probably this is one of the important things that this mapping study tried to capture. It's not only about where we are now, but where we are going as a continent, countries. So we have seen countries moving in this period, even just of the mapping study, from no NQF to early thinking. It was clearly the case of Cameroon. In the first response to the survey, the response was no NQF. But in the meanwhile, yeah, we know the country is moving into early thinking. Also, Guinea-Bissau started the process, and Sierra Leone. From early thinking to development and consultation, we have seen Angola clearly going through these steps, moving forward. From development and consultation stage to NQF approved and started implementation, I already mentioned Eswatini. And then from NQF approved and started implementation to NQF in place and implementation, and for some time and reviewed. I would say the case of Cape Verde that adopted new NQF legislation in 2020, in February. So revising already the legislation that had been adopted 10 years earlier. Policy objectives, I will now not, of course, go through all the dimensions, very briefly, just the most important ones. NQFs are associated with a range of strategic and policy objectives, and we tried to cluster them. And we looked naturally at a very wide range of documentation and interviews, and we came up with this, let's say, these clusters of policy objectives. For example, integration, coherence, and permeability is an important cluster. Many NQFs try to reach this important objective. Then quality, transparency, enhanced visibility, trust of end users. Then the parity of esteem, the valorisation, valorization, value of learning in different contexts and subsystems appears also in many NQFs. We'll see it again today in the LQF, Lesotho Qualifications Framework, inclusion, regional and global comparability, wider societal and economic goals as well. This is the very almost last slide, just to say that, of course, national qualifications databases and registers are important, let's say, operational tools of NQFs in the implementation stage. And the international practice shows that the establishment of such qualifications databases, especially when they are available online, accessible to the public, contribute to make NQFs transparent and reach out to public users. And we more or less clustered the findings in these three clusters. So there is this first group, let's say, composed of those examples, cases that have databases of quality assured qualifications linked with the NQF, managed in a centralized manner, accessible and searchable online, notably via the website of the NQF lead institution. And the examples given here are, of course, South Africa's SAQA National Learners Records Database, Kenya, NACMIS, the Management Information System of Qualifications, Cabo Verde National Catalog of Qualifications, and Mozambique Catalog of the National Professional Qualifications. Then a second group are listings and repertoires of courses and qualifications under the oversight of different subsystems, so not centralized. Sometimes these subsystems are quality assurance, led by quality assurance agencies and also institutions. So they can be accessible online or in yearbooks, tables, legal acts of authorization. And we have seen some examples listed there: Angola, Morocco, Senegal. And finally, a third group, we have the case of Cameroon, where the information on authorized, accredited courses and qualifications is available upon request, and not always with internet support. In printed publications, sometimes very detailed, useful, but printed publications. And that, to finalize, the ACQF mapping study, besides analysis, is also going to be a reference tool for all of you, all interested stakeholders, experts, policymakers. And therefore, it is accompanied by a set of web-based tools for further reference, to be further updated, for comparison of information on qualifications and qualifications framework. So the report includes hyperlinks, and the report, as I said, will be released in October, and then in other languages in November. And then all these databases that compose these tools, these reference tools, will be migrated, not really updated, they migrated into the ACQF website later on in the project. This was a very brief overview of the mapping study, and a big thank you to all of you who contributed and responded to questions and shared information. And now we move on directly then to session 2, and we would like then to invite Mr. Kobotlo, Director of Policy, Strategy and Information of the Council on Higher Education of Lesotho, to please share your screen and start your presentation. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'll go through I'll try to share and let's see.
Share screen is the green button.
Yeah, my screen has. My screen has changed. Let me see. Let me do this. All right. I see where share is.
Yeah.
Let me
It's
see.
the green button in the top, on the bottom.
Yeah. Yes, I've clicked. What is this? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just need to get it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kobotlo. You have 30 minutes, Mr. Kobotlo, for your presentation. Thank you very much. We see
Okay,
your presentation.
thank you. Let me just. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Struggled a little bit there with technology, but I think we are good to go.
Yes, please.
Are we audible to everybody?
Yes, very good, very well.
All right, thank you very much. I would just like to indicate before I start with the presentation that I am with my colleagues, my two colleagues, Professor Blackie and Mr. Mutari. So they will be coming in when we start getting into the discussions, but I'll just run through the presentation very quickly.
Thank you.
For those colleagues around the world who may not have full information about Lesotho, just a quick country background. We are a democratic kingdom and situated in the southern African part of the African continent. And Lesotho has 2.2 million inhabitants. And generally, all the people speak one language, and we are called Basotho. And Lesotho is a member of the Southern African Development Community and African Union, and of course the United Nations as well, and many other multilateral bodies out there. But SADC becomes important in this regard because it is the one that that has provided most guidance to ourselves within the region in relation to the qualifications framework that we are presenting today. And in terms of the education system, so that people at least have a sense of the education system that is in which the qualifications framework is being implemented. We have primary and secondary, and that is termed basic education. And then from there, we have tertiary education, which comprises technical and vocational education together with university education. Then we have, in terms of the basic education landscape, we have public schools, and we have church-owned schools that are supported by government. Basically, government supports church-based or church-owned schools because it sees them as part of the initiative towards providing the service throughout the country, because public schools in themselves would not be sufficient to provide access. So this is why there's that arrangement government to support church-owned schools, and then we have purely private schools that do not receive any form of support from government. Then from there, there's one national university, the National University of Lesotho, and two private universities and a number of colleges. That is at the tertiary level. Moving on into the structures that support education in the country, we have the Ministry of Education and Training, which is at the apex, in charge of all affairs related to education. Then we have an agency within the ministry that focuses specifically on curriculum development or basic education. And then we have inspectorate looking at issues of quality assurance in relation to basic education. And then we have the Examinations Council of Lesotho, which is responsible for examinations for basic education. And then the Technical and Vocational Department. This is a department within the Ministry of Education, but its responsibility is on technical and vocational education and training. And then from there, we have the Council on Higher Education, from where I'm speaking, which is primarily or initially just responsible for quality assurance in higher education. And its mandate has recently been extended to now deal with issues of managing implementation of the Lesotho qualifications framework. Yeah, so brief historical background would be that the first time Lesotho developed a qualifications framework was in 2005, but for a number of reasons, that qualifications framework was not fully implemented, and government decided later on that it would not be prudent to implement the framework in the form in which it was. The framework was proposing a number of structures to manage the qualifications framework. For instance, there was an agency that would just be dealing with qualifications separately as an authority. And government felt that given the small size of the country and the small size of the education sector, it would not be sustainable and best use of resources to have many agencies implementing the qualifications framework, whereas the size of the country and the size of the sector is fairly small. So for those and a number of other reasons, that's why the 205 qualifications framework was not fully implemented. And but work had to be done. The work that related to qualifications had to be done, and it was done on an ad hoc basis by various agencies dealing with areas that are relevant to their work. So revision of the 205 qualification framework started in 2016, and it went through a highly consultative process. We noted a question that was raised in your presentation, Eduardo, that about how long it takes. Of course, you would have different answers to that question. It depends on a range of stakeholders, the size of the country, the size of the sector, and so on and so forth. But I think what we can say is that it is important that that process is consultative. Yes. Because the framework, then that way everybody should feel that they've had a say in the development of the framework, and they will equally have a share in in its implementation, and the fact that it's one policy area that affects many aspects of people's lives, either within organizations, as individuals, and so on and so forth. So the revised framework was approved by Cabinet in June 2019. That was quite a milestone for us as a country, given where we've come from, as you can see, from 2005, without having a fully implemented qualifications framework. And because also a qualifications framework is a bedrock for quality assurance, we were quality assuring without a proper foundation laid. This is why it was such a huge milestone to get to June 2019, and it was then launched after that, and I will not go into the details of that, but just that talks to how important this particular policy document is to us as a country. It is getting into the framework itself now. It is an integrated 10-level qualifications framework, and we also are aligned to the SADC qualifications framework. As we were revising the framework, we were very cognizant of the need to align to the SADC qualifications framework. Of course, SADC has a much more rigorous and detailed exercise that Lesotho is part of to ensure full alignment, but we can comfortably and confidently say that this qualifications framework was developed in line with the SADC qualifications framework. It covers basic education, technical, vocational education, higher education, and professional development awards. Moving very quickly, the objectives of the framework are to integrate existing sector frameworks into a single framework, also to remove barriers between institutions and other subsectors for improving learner progression. It also intends to uphold equity and redress, enabling citizens to acquire qualifications irrespective of age and lack of formal qualifications. So issues of recognition of prior learning and a number of issues come very strongly within this qualifications framework to improve articulation and learner mobility through links and pathways between various components of the qualification. For instance, there's quite a lot of wastage within the system, within our system, since the qualifications framework is new, and we now hope it will help us deal with some of these issues that emerge as a result of lack of articulation. For instance, you might find somebody starting at a certificate level, going to a college to do a certificate, and then do a diploma, and then get to a bachelor's degree, still going full duration. If a certificate takes 2 years, they will take 2 years, diploma takes 3 years, they take 3 years, bachelor's degree takes 4 years. So you see, just to obtain a bachelor's degree, a person has spent, a long time within the education sector and wasted a lot of resources in the process. That's just an illustration of the kind of wastage that we would have within the system with poor articulation. And now, to foster quality and relevance through outcomes and standard-based education, and also to acknowledge and value diversity and worth of all qualifications as they serve identified purposes, and to facilitate curriculum innovation and qualifications renewal, and also upgrading technical and vocational education qualifications to higher levels. Currently, in practice, we have our TVET qualifications only going up to a diploma, but the qualifications framework upgrades them all the way to the PhD level, which this objective talks to. And then to ensure consistency in terms of the qualification verification and articulation processes of all awards. So these are the objectives of the qualifications framework. What is the Lesotho qualifications framework exactly? It is a coherent and integrated framework. Like we indicated, it is integrated for all qualifications in Lesotho. And as indicated earlier, it is consistent with other country frameworks and is in line and aligned to the SADC qualifications framework. It allows comparison of qualifications and mobility of learners. How qualifications are compared with our qualification framework, they are compared by level of complexity using the 10 level descriptors that look at issues such as knowledge, skills, and competencies, and also by volume of learning using a credit system where 1 credit is equals to 10 notional learning activity. The qualifications included on the framework, we have all certificates, all diplomas, and all degrees, higher education, technical and vocational, general education, including professional development awards, and adult education. So we'll perhaps spend a few minutes on the summary framework just to take the webinar through the framework. The 10 level, as in maybe just talk to the graphic besides the table. The graphic besides the table just illustrates certificates in purple, indicating that from the lowest level up to level 8, we offer the framework does provide for certificates, can be certificates and then postgraduate certificates, and then you have professional development awards from level 6 in the red bar, from level 6 up to level 10. Then we have diplomas from level 6 up to level 8, and then we have degrees degrees from level 7 to level 10. Then we have, coming to the matrix itself, we have academic/professional track, basically starting at the bottom with primary certificates, junior certificate, and also technical education certificate. We'll talk to the sub-track, just focusing on the main track, and then you go to level 4 O level slash Lesotho qualification, Lesotho General Certificate of School Living, certificate LGCSE, and advanced standing standard certificate, diploma, bachelor's, and so on. Then there's the sub-track. The sub-track under academic and professional track basically focuses on the technical education, but happening within the education, the mainstream education. So that is the technical education. For instance, in a school, you would have students that would be focusing more on the academic line, and those that would be focusing on the technical line. So the sub-track within that track just illustrates that we have within our system those two, so that students can have the flexibility. Students can have the flexibility within these two sub-tracks up to level 5 to move from one space to another. There are some common subjects that they do together. There are those that they wouldn't be doing together. And then moving to the TVET track. The TVET track has both formal, professional, and industry-based qualifications. Like we indicated, currently in practice, the TVET track only goes up to level 6 at the diploma level, but the qualifications framework has opened that up such that the qualifications can go to up to level 10. but there's a subtrack. There are two subtracks just below level 6 there. Basically what those mean is that the first subtrack is the education that happens within the institutions for where one goes to school to obtain a qualification. Then the subtrack within that is for recognition of prior learning, where then they will go through trade tests. This is why trade test A, trade test B, and so on and so forth. Then from there, it goes all the way from diploma or all the way to the bachelor's degree. Then we have credit values on the two last columns. If we can just come back very briefly to talk about the academic and professional track, just to indicate that professional development awards are included in this track, even though they may not necessarily be specified. We could not specify them because we didn't find terms that we could use that would generalize, you know, various levels, like you have a diploma, you have a bachelor's, and so on and so forth. But for professional track, because you would have professionals in engineering, in health, in accountancy, and so on and so forth, we couldn't find terms that would generalize those, but nonetheless, they are included in that track. So basically, that is the quick summary of the Lesotho qualifications framework. Moving on. Now, with regard to the credit system, we noted that the credit system provides flexibility and mobility in learner pathways through the various platforms such as credit accumulation and transfer. We noted, and the framework acknowledges the importance of mobility of learners and flexibility such that they can be able to carry their credits and have them recognized either within the same institution in a different qualification, or in a different institution, or even in a different country. And also issues of recognition of prior learning are quite critical and heavily embedded within the framework. Recognition of current competencies and work integrated, issues of work integrated learning. And looking at issues of how the complexity of a qualification is specified within the Lesotho qualifications framework. We have all qualifications on the LQF specifying learning outcomes appropriate to the level, descriptor and specific to the qualification. So issues of learning outcomes and level descriptors are quite important and critical to this. And also learning outcomes also describe what a learner is able to demonstrate on successful completion of the qualification in terms of the key categories of the level descriptors, which are knowledge, skills, and competencies. And learner's performance is assessed against the learning outcomes, basically indicating that assessment ultimately is based on the learning outcomes, when the learning outcomes themselves are informed by the level descriptors. How is the volume of qualifications specified? All qualifications are assigned a credit value indicating the level of learning. And as indicated earlier, 1 credit is equals to 10 notional hours of learning activity for an average learner. It's important that the qualifications framework looks at an average learner so that then it can be able to carry everybody without focusing on the fast-paced learners, in which case the rest of the learners would be left behind. Therefore, credit is a notional value and includes all activities related to learning, class time, lectures, project work, laboratory work, and so on and so forth. So that is what is included in that. Now, the Lesotho Qualifications Framework has a very detailed presentation of the level descriptors. We may not go through that detailed account, but those who would be interested in having a closer look at the level descriptors can visit the CHE website. They will be able to access a comprehensive matrix that presents the level descriptors. But the level descriptors are quite critical as a design feature of our framework because they provide the guidance that is required for those, for developers of qualifications, and also for evaluation of qualifications for us to, and also for registration for institutions when they register qualifications on the framework. This is the component of the framework that we look at and we apply. And the LKF notions of depth operate on a continuum from general to specified, issues of breadth and kinds of knowledge and complexity. And the level descriptors are structured as follows. Levels, of course, we indicated ours is a 10-level qualifications framework. And then the generic statement and the credit value, areas of knowledge and nature of skills, of course, agency and context. But as indicated, for those who want to get a good sense of exactly what the level descriptors entail, then can visit and can access the full document on the CHE website. Alignment with the SADC Regional Qualifications Framework. We indicated that the qualifications framework was revised. We ensured that it is fully aligned to the Regional Qualifications Framework. But in addition to that, in addition to ensuring as we were working on it, now SADC has a project where all its member states are required to align their qualifications framework to the SADC qualifications framework. And there's a process to be followed. There's a very specific process to be followed in that regard. This will lead to SADC then being able to declare all qualifications from all member states to be at a particular level. And that is a very important project for all of us within the SADC region, because it will enhance the mobility that our various qualifications frameworks do advocate. For instance, the vision is that once all qualifications are fully aligned and SADC has satisfied itself that qualifications are aligned, then when learners graduate from our institutions, their certificate will indicate that this qualification is at this particular level of the National Qualifications Framework, and it is on this particular, which is aligned to the SADC Qualifications Framework at this particular level. So when a learner leaves, or a professional who would have graduated from Lesotho, for instance, leaves Lesotho, goes to Angola, either looking for employment or to further their studies, or goes to Tanzania, or anywhere, South Africa, Zambia, then when they produce their certificate, then they can easily see that, oh, okay, this person holds a qualification that is a level 8 qualification, and which qualification from the qualifications framework that is aligned to the SADC qualifications framework at the same level. Then that will make things a lot easier for our learners and our professionals. So we continue to work towards that alignment so that colleagues are not confused when we say that our qualifications framework is aligned to SADC, but we still are working on a process for further alignment. So that's basically what it means, that much as we developed our qualifications framework in line with the SADC and making sure that it is aligned, but SADC has a process for member states to follow. It includes looking at issues of systems, issues of quality assurance within various countries, and so on and so forth. And we regard that as a very important project that will be able to enhance mobility of our professionals and our learners. Now, what are the implementation arrangements? Implementation arrangements, we have the policy document that talks to the qualifications framework, provides for an agency that will run the qualifications framework. And that agency is the Lesotho Qualifications and Quality Council. As I indicated earlier that we could not fully implement the qualifications framework that had been developed previously because it's provided for a number of agencies that were separate and dealing with separate areas within the various tiers of education. And that was seen not to be the best model for us. And now this is why we've come up with this model. Basically, this body will run the whole of the qualifications framework because it is an integrated framework and it is yet to be established. And while we're working on the establishment of this body, then the Council on Higher Education will implement the qualifications framework, basically dealing with issues of verification, registration of national qualifications, and evaluation of foreign qualifications. So this is just a snapshot of the Lesotho Qualifications Quality Council. We have the Minister of Education and Training at the top, and then we would have that agency. That agency will be quasi, will be independent in a way, in that it will be a parastatal. Parastatal basically meaning it is a government enterprise, but that is allowed to run its own affairs. So it will not necessarily be a department of government. And these are in the yellow boxes. Those are the basic areas that the body will be looking at. You'll have issues of policy research and issues of finance and corporate, so support kind of functions. And then the core functions will be looking at higher education qualifications. This is why then the Council on Higher Education, its mandate will be subsumed under this body, under the very same business unit we're looking at, the higher education qualifications and quality assurance. Then we'll have another business unit looking at technical and vocational qualifications and quality related to that, and then issues of basic education. So this is the shape and form this body will take, but as indicated, it has yet to be established. We only are starting to work on the supporting legislation that will ultimately lead to the establishment of this body. Now the legislative and regulatory framework. So basically this we see as some of the main functions that will be performed by the LQQC once it comes into being. Qualifications framework, architecture and maintenance, and development of level and qualifications descriptors, Right now, we have global qualifications level descriptors. And so the qualifications descriptors at cascading from the main ones then will be developed at that level. Registration and validation of qualifications and part qualifications and development of standards and issues of evaluation and so on and so forth. So we see this list as some of the main issues that then will be performed, will form the regulatory framework and will be performed by the Lesotho Qualifications and Quality Council. Now, towards the end, and this is the last slide, maybe before we come to the last slide, just to say that this, Madam Chair and colleagues, is a quick snapshot of the Lesotho Qualifications Framework, and we hope it does provide some indication of the road we've traveled to get here and what is contained within the framework itself, and that perhaps will be helpful to somebody working on their own frameworks in whatever form or shape. And we also thought we could spend a minute in this presentation looking at the COVID-19. Education in the era of COVID-19, it's been quite a struggle for us here in Lesotho, as we believe it has been for a number of other countries. Mostly our institutions are face-to-face in terms of their approach. And therefore, when we were hit by COVID-19, we undertook a quick rapid assessment just to check how institutions were coping, because we were under lockdown, but somehow the academic year and academic program had to continue. So we then noted that institutions are forced to use blended learning, employing a variety of educational platforms. And it's important to note that institutions were not necessarily ready and prepared for this, because it all hit us by surprise. A ton of bricks coming down, and the majority of higher education institutions lack the requisite infrastructure to access data, because this was not necessarily their way of looking at this. And therefore, what we did at the Council on Higher Education was to engage with the authorities, the communications authority, to meet institutions halfway by zero rating certain education platforms, so that access to learning could be for all students. And we currently do not have standards for online learning. We're in the process of developing our own ODL standards and blended learning, but we were hit by this thing before they could be finalized and implemented. And no higher education has been assessed for its capacity to use blended learning, but institutions, of course, they make do with what is available. And what we are doing is asking institutions to use the SADC ODL and quality assurance guidelines that were developed with the support of the Commonwealth of Learning, such that there is no vacuum and work still continue. And it is not clear how the institutions will maintain quality or provision of higher education upon reopening. So I think, in a nutshell, we're still struggling with coping under COVID, and being able to still make progress in delivering education and in ensuring that access is not hindered, number one. Number two, issues of quality, and also ensuring that quality, of course, will be affected, but that is not badly affected to the extent that we may not be happy with the outcome. So, Madam Chair and colleagues, in Sesotho we say "Homo," which means thank you very much, and you obviously would be familiar with the thank you. And in East Africa, they would say "Asante sana." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let us perhaps give a round of applause to Mr. Kobotlo, Lesotho Qualifications Framework, for this presentation, for sharing this road and all these achievements, including very interesting points made in the end about the response to COVID. Thank you very much, Mr. Kobotlo, for your very impressive, clear, and very informative presentation. We would like to just have, let's say, 2-3 minutes. There are some questions in the chat, and namely, I would just mention 2 main questions. So there is one question from Dr. Dieudonné Koumufine from Cameroon about alignment with the SADC qualifications framework. And I would like perhaps just to say, Dr. Dieudonné, there will be a webinar, one of our planned webinars has exactly 1 session dedicated to SADC qualifications framework and to, of course, the alignment process. But if one of the colleagues or Mr. Kobotlo or Joe Samuels would like to say a very brief response or contribution. So Mr. Dieudonné is asking how the process goes and how, let's say, how complex it is to do this alignment. Was it not, he asks, was it not difficult to align the other member states to SADC qualifications framework? What was the strategy in place in order to be aligned, to align with the other member states with SADC? So if you want one of you countries, SADC countries present here who have already aligned or are in the process, if you want to give a very short contribution, you have the floor, or then we will of course have a specific webinar. This is one question. The second question is, many people immediately became very interested when Mr. Kobotlo, you mentioned in your last slide the work you are doing on standards for online learning. So immediately I see there are like 3-4 participants interested in this and how you are doing and what have you reached and already. So this could be certainly a very interesting topic also for future discussion. If you'd like to say also a word or 2 about this point. So standards for online learning, where are you at this stage, and could you share with the other countries some information on the work you are doing in this area? And everybody is actually acknowledging the quality of your presentation, Mr. Kobotlo, and congratulating you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduarda. I noticed that colleagues from the region are here. Fiona is there from Seychelles. I haven't seen other colleagues, and her framework, together with the South African qualifications framework, are the only 2 that have been fully acknowledged as aligned. So I'm sure Fiona will come in, but I would just like to indicate that the process, the SADC has developed a process to be followed. And the process, for instance, we had a pilot We had a pilot with about 8 countries that were part of the pilot, and some guidelines were developed that would be followed, and training was conducted for all those pilot countries to ensure that we all did the same thing, and even structures were indicated that the kind of structures that should be put in place. For instance, in all the pilot countries, they had to establish the national alignment committees. Yes, so each country had to establish a committee, and which has very specific terms of reference. And then that would be the committee that would work on this. So in a nutshell, SADC ensured that there were very clear guidelines and very clear steps that would be followed by each country. And there's a technical committee. There's a technical committee on certification and TCCA. It's Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation. This is the technical committee of SADC that oversees this process. So basically, that's what I can say, that it is critical for any region that would be considering this to have very clear guidelines and clear terms of reference for whatever structure, such that each country doesn't do its own thing, and to have several meetings and ensure that there's training so that everybody does the same thing, and also even the template of the kind of report that had to be compiled was given, and also the kind of stages that would have to be followed for such a report to be compiled by each country. That was stipulated. I will stop at this point for my colleagues in the region to come through. I've noted that Joe Samuels is also present. He, in fact, has been leading that process together with colleagues from SACA, and Fiona, the colleague from Seychelles as well. I think they can come in to
Thank you, Mr. Kobotlo. You already gave a very, I think, clear response about the process, the alignment criteria, the National Alignment Committee, the steps, the training that was conducted, also the roles of the different countries in the main 6 areas of work. Thanks a lot. Since we will have a dedicated webinar, we can also share more information later, a little bit later today, at our next session of questions and answers. And I just would like to see, there is also, finally, let us leave this question also for the next session of questions and answers. It's a question from Morocco. Asking about the evaluation of learning, distance learning, particularly as it stands now in the context of COVID-19. Since Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi will also share with us information exactly on this point, maybe we could leave all these questions about evaluation, learning modalities for the next session of questions and answers.
Sorry, Eduarda, can I come in?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I think as Mr. Kobotlo had already explained, quite a lot of detail about the alignment. But what I can do, and I mean, I can pass it on to you. There's a little slide that we've developed that outlines the stages, and the steps, as it were. I mean, it's in the form of a slide. I'll send it to you, and you can circulate it to people before we have the special session that you are so passionately talking about. Okay.
Do you have the slide in front of you, and do you want to share your slide, your screen?
No, I don't have it in front of me. I will have to have a look at it, in my records.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Joe, for this input, important as always.
Eduarda,
yes,
for the second question about the ODL, if I can invite my colleague Professor Pluggy to talk a bit on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Prof.
So the standards of online learning. We can also continue in the second session of questions and answers a bit later today. Thank you, everybody, for all these inputs.
Unfortunately, my colleague has just indicated that he's been disconnected. But basically, the process, we're still working on the ODL standards. We've engaged. In fact, we would have completed by that exercise by now, but we couldn't due to COVID. So we've engaged a consultant who's done some work. We now are at the stage where we need to interrogate the draft and consult on it. And we are planning to find ways to do that virtually, given that we can't have large gatherings. But given the interest that seems to be in this area, we will, through your office, Eduarda, keep colleagues informed and share information as we crystallize that deliverable.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kobotlo. This is excellent. So we will continue this discussion in any case on standards of online or ODL. And thank you very much again for your excellent presentation, for all the responses you gave to questions. And we stay still connected a little bit more. We pass immediately then the floor to Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi. He will present, he will have a tough job because he's going to present two cases, BQF, Bahrain National Qualifications Framework, and then also the case of Arab Qualifications Framework, which is the regional qualifications framework. Thank you so much, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, for all the work you have done on this presentation. It's a detailed presentation. And Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, I'd like just to mention that he is also a member of the advisory board of the project ACQF, which is harmonization in higher education in Africa. So it's an AU-EU project. Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi is then the representative exactly of ANCAE in this advisory board. Thank you. You have the floor for your presentations, the two of them. You can stop at the end of the first if there are questions. Thank you.
Is my presentation clear for everybody?
It is very well, yes, visible. Good. Thank you.
Great. Good. So, I mean, let me just have this. Okay, good. Great. Okay, it's actually a pleasure to participate with our colleagues in this webinar. And I will be discussing and talking about the role of Bahraini ACQF. Okay. Now, the Education and Training Quality Authority, BQA, is an independent authority. We report to the Prime Minister Court. So the question that everybody asks us, are you related to the Ministry of Education? Answer, no. We are independent from the Ministry of Education. In Bahrain, we don't have Ministry of Higher Education. We have only Ministry of Education that's responsible even for the higher education. The authority being established in 2008, okay, and it consists of two directorate of two arms. The right arm here, the review arms that will review the higher education, government school, private and public, and also they do the vocational reviews, and they publish all the review report. We don't publish executive summary only. No, the full review report, you can access them at bqa.gov.ph. So all the reports, Arabic and English, you can find them on our website. The other arm is the National Qualification Framework and Examination. The national examination, we actually conduct examination. We actually previously been doing for 3, 6, 9, and 12, and recently we've been doing for 2 grades, 6 and 9. But this year, unfortunately, we couldn't conduct the exams. But next year, we are going to do it online. The NQF is the director that I am heading now, the National Qualification Framework, and the Bahraini NQF consists of 10 levels. Integrated compulsory framework. All institutions in Bahrain, they have to place their national qualification on the NQF. Okay, so all of them, the higher education, vocational, and schools, it's a compulsory. It covers all learning sectors. It covers general education, schools, higher education, and vocational education. It caters for all forms of learning, formal, informal, non-formal. Quality assured program, only program that they pass the quality assurance sealed, they will be placed on the NQF. Level described by a level descriptor, okay, and all the level descriptor, the handbooks, everything, you can access them on our website. Complexity, as you climb the ladder, you will, the higher or the difficult the qualification going to be. Level 1 and 2 dedicated for with very simple qualification for special needs. 3 for the intermediate. 4 for the government, توجيهية or the graduation qualification. 5 for the advanced, like the IB. 6 for the diploma. 7 associate degree. 8 for bachelor degree. 9 for the master. 10 for the doctorate degree. Regarding the NQF aims of the NQF, the Bahraini NQF, is to ensure that the quality that there is a quality on the qualification and the validity of qualification, because we place the qualification for a period from 3 to 5 years. Promote learning outcomes driven education and improve transparency. It will clarify for the parents, for the stakeholders, the value of the qualification. It will also going to reference the Bahraini NQF with other NQF around the world and the regional qualification framework. It will also facilitate the credit transfer and the recognition of RPL, recognition of prior learning, and facilitate establishing the progression path between education and training sector, which is still to be developed, especially in Bahrain. In Bahrain, still we are having some difficulty in transferring education between the education and training, but thanks to COVID-19, actually, we are being today at the parliament, actually, they have sent us a request that they are going to revise the education law in Bahrain. So they are on the way to recognize the online learning and also to remove the barrier between education and training. Encourage cooperation and collaboration among education and training stakeholders, because the NQF as a reform tool, it invites all the stakeholders, so everybody gonna work together in under one umbrella. Facilitate recognition of formal, informal, non-formal. Again, thanks to COVID, soon in Bahrain, we are going to recognize informal and the non-formal education. Up to now, we only recognize formal education. But as I mentioned before, the parliament here in Bahrain are pushing to recognize the informal and non-formal learning. Of course, under procedures and under policies. The operation. We conduct 2 operations. We have the national qualification designed, delivered in Bahrain, and we have the foreign qualification that are designed but delivered in Bahrain, designed outside Bahrain, like the CPA and AAT, all those international qualification. Before we place the qualification, we have something called institution listing, which is accreditation of the institution. So the institutions need to be accredited to make sure that they have the formal arrangement of quality assurance. And after they pass the listing, we invite them to place their qualification on the NQF. For a qualification is alignment, we call it alignment request, and it can be done through a sole provider or through awarding bodies. Like if awarding bodies, they can send a request, but provided this qualification is delivered in Bahrain. Or if I am a sole provider offering a CPA qualification, I can send a request to BQA to align the qualification. So placement for the national, alignment for the foreign qualification. Eligibility criteria, let me move this. To be eligible as an institution, you need to have a valid license, approval issued by a regulatory body. You need to offer a national qualification. You need to have an internal quality assured within the institution. You need to pass our accreditation, and you need to offer qualification that meet our criteria, our requirement. For the qualification to be placed, in order for any qualification to be placed on the BQA NQF, you need to have valid approval, have an assessment, have appropriate structure, and express in units, which comprise of at least 10 notional learning hours, as my colleagues mentioned a while ago, should be considered at least 1 credit. The listing. Let's look at the standard of listing. Standard of listing are comprised of 5: access, transfer, progression, qualification, development, approval, assessment, design, moderation, certification, sustainability of CQI. Within the 5 standards, these are the accreditation standard for any institution to be listed on the NQF. Standard number 1, we look here at access, admission, credit accumulation, internal and external credit transfer, and we look at the formal arrangement, and we look at the policies and procedure that cater all these indicators. We look at whether institution, they have a career progression, they have learning pathways, and they need to have in place a policy to support recognition of prior learning. Appeal is a very important. We need to have an appeal policy against access and transfer. Standard 2, qualification development. You need to show us how justification of need. Does Bahrain need a qualification in nuclear energy, for example? Do we have a market for this qualification? So you need to have a justification as a market study or a need assessment study that the institution they need to develop for the review. Qualification design, we look at the design of the qualification. Compliance, does this qualification has a compliance? Learning resources, we look at the labs and learning support for the qualification. The internal approve, has it been approved internally within minutes of meeting? Also need to be approved first from the government and then from the institution, from the board of trustees, or from the college council or university council. Qualification, internal and external review. We look here at the internal review, the evaluation, the internal and the external review. We look at all the evidences. Standard 3, we look at exams and moderation of exams. Design of exam, internal and external verification, moderation, marking criteria, measuring and how they've been achieving the learning outcomes. Feedback, what feedback given to learner, approval of the assessment result, and the appeal against the assessment and the appeal against the results. Here it's been there is a typo mistake, apology. And security of assessment, we look at the records with a few institutions. We do actually a one-day visit to make sure that the evidence are there. A certification issuance for the certificate, authentication, record of certification. Last standard, we look at the quality assurance, whether there is a system, mechanism within the institution. We look at risk, especially this indicator number 5.3 has been added with the new edition of our standard. We call it COVID edition, okay, that we have updated our standard and make sure that crisis management, there is a policy, and institution, there is a procedure as well. Overall picture of our job, of our accreditation, institution submit an application. We received at BQA the application, we do the evaluation, and then it goes for approval. It goes to the higher education, to the Supreme Council of Education and Training in Bahrain for approval and listing, then it will go on our website. Finish from accreditation of an institution, let us look at the placement of qualification. The process of placing national qualification on NQF after fulfilling the validation standard. There are 5: justification of need, qualification compliance, qualification design, assessment, and NQF to make sure that the level, whether 8, 7, and 8, we need to see the evidence of each. Justification of need, when the panel goes and visits the institution, which is normally a one-day, and today, by the way, we have conducted our first virtual, using Teams, virtual site visits for a university in Bahrain. So the panel have looked at the actual tangible needs, stakeholder feedback, and we look at the career progression. And for standard 2, we look at the compliances, we look at the qualification license, approval process, access, transfer, graduation requirement, qualification alignment, and benchmark. Has it been benchmarked? We look at evidence of benchmark, and they need to provide evidence against every sub-indicator. Qualification internal and external evaluation, and mapping confirmation process. In order for the qualification to be placed on the NQF, it is an internal matter for the institution that they need to have a mapping panel with a scorecard to confirm the process. 2 teams, 1 team will do the mapping, 1 other team will confirm the level of the qualification. Design of the qualification, we look at the titles, we look at the learning outcomes, we look at the qualification attendance and delivery, whether it's face-to-face or online, qualification structure, and the content of the qualification, progression, flow of the qualification, units, and the learning resources and learning support provided to the learner. And of course, the special needs. Every institution we look at, they need to have policies and procedure for the learners with special needs. The 4th standard, we look here at examination and the moderation of every examination. Again, we look for evidence for internal and external moderation, how institutions are going to achieve learning outcomes. I know during COVID, it is a little hard, but institution, they need to have more than a channel to measure that students have achieved the learning outcomes. Feedback to learners, this is an area that we need the institution to provide evidence that feedback being given to learner, of course, appeal and integrity of assessment, especially during COVID-19. We need to make sure that institution, they have an integrity policy for all their conducting of examination. Level, if a bachelor degree, if it's an 8, an institution, they need to provide evidence about the level, credit, and against, and also we need all these evidences to be based on our credit framework requirement. Now, let us look at the overall. Institution will do an internal mapping panel confirmation then they will send the application internally to the other panel for the confirmation. Once it's finished from the confirmation, it will pass to the BQA. We receive the application. We do, first of all, internal verification. And then we do validation visit, which we have conducted today. Once we finish, we write the review report. It goes to the institution for factual accuracy. It comes back if there is an appeal. Once we finish from all these procedures, it will go for the approval and placement on the NQF. And institution can do two kinds of appeal within the validation, or appeal out, or another appeal after the placement, after it is published on our website. Alignment of foreign qualification, in brief, we have 4 standards, okay, to place any foreign qualification: ownership, justification, quality assurance, and the level and credit, almost similar to the national qualification. And the ownership, we need to know about the awarding body, because it is a foreign qualification. So we look at the authorization, whether if it is an internal, if it's a provider inside Bahrain, we look at the authorization, we look at the compliances they have. Same thing, they need to provide justification. Is it fit for purpose? Does Bahrain need? Is there any demand for this qualification within Bahrain? Quality assurance, delivery, assessment, criteria, monitoring, and reviews, almost similar to the national qualification. The level also almost similar. Here we align the level and we align the credit for the foreign qualification. Referencing the NQF to internationally, I am pleased to say that Bahrain is the second country to be, after Hong Kong, to have officially referenced its national qualification framework with the Scottish Credit and Qualification Framework. And right now we are working with the Malaysian qualification framework, and the work in progress, but it has been stopped due to COVID-19. Hopefully, within a few months, we can restart our referencing activity with the MQA. Our future plan, the New Zealand and the Gulf qualification framework, that this is our future plan. The GCC is not yet, has not yet been, actually, it is not active as yet, but the plan is there. We have participated with the countries, with a few countries and the Gulf countries here to actually develop the GCC qualification framework. Areas for improvement for the institutions. There is a need for greater cooperation by institution to meet the listing, the accreditation, and the placement requirement. Okay. Capacity building, still there is a need to build capacity building of employees in relation to the formal arrangement and transfer credit, progression, and mobility of learners. There is a need for develop appropriate mechanism to measure the achievement of learning outcomes. And this is more, we can see it with the vocational institution. Vocational institutions in Bahrain are still suffering from developing an outcome-based qualification. Credit framework, institution, they need to comply with the credit framework in terms of qualification titles, minimum credit hours. After 5 years of operation, the NQF being active from 2015. Now we have spent 5 years. After 5 years, we are still having some problem with institution to be comply with the requirement of the credit framework. RPL, to promote the concept of lifelong learning, and to improve the transition pathways between education and training sector, and to reach common understanding of RPL, which is no need to repeat the learning. If you have the experience, you don't have to repeat the learning, you don't have to take the courses. In Bahrain, unfortunately, and even with few countries and and the Gulf states, RPL is not yet been recognized, but as I mentioned, right now there is a big move to actually recognize RPL. Now, what did we do with the COVID-19? I will talk few slides what we have, since February, what we did. We have conducted virtual capacity building workshops and awareness session to ensure there is a continuous support to provided to an institution. We have conducted virtual readiness meeting using Teams to ensure institution ready to submit their application as per the schedule plan. And as of today, we have conducted our first virtual. So we have been successful during the first semester in September, and almost all the application came on time, and we have scheduled the visits now from this month to continue as normal, to continue the new normal with our conducting of virtual site visits. As I mentioned before, after 5 years of operation, we have gathered a feedback from the stakeholder. We did a benchmarking. We have just during a month of June, July, and August, and we have also updated our AQF documents. What we did after 5 years, we have actually consulted our stakeholder, the advisory committee, because the NQF has an advisory committee consisted of the Ministry of Labor, representative from Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, Civil Service Bureau, representative from the government, representative from the private institution, representative from government institution, and representative from the industry. We have also consulted our institution, consulted our validation panel, our expert, those who conduct for us on our behalf the review, because we actually rely on panel from Bahrain and sometimes from outside Bahrain, but mainly all our validation panel are from Bahrain. They have been working in Bahrain, and when we conduct the review, the site visits, we bring academic and we bring an industry. We bring two people. The panel consists of academician and industry. And also we have consulted our NQF staff to get their feedback after 5 years of operation. We have conducted a benchmark study with the Dutch qualification framework, Malaysian qualification framework, Scottish credit framework, New Zealand, and the Australian qualification framework. We have reviewed our NQF document. We have reviewed the NQF general policy, the level descriptor, credit framework, the NQF standard, and NQF handbook procedure and forms. We have also updated our NQF listing standards and qualification placement standards, and we have actually developed, or we have asked all the institutions to send us soft copy, and we have developed our online hub, so institution can send all the evidences. We don't take any hard copy. Everything should be soft copy. And today we have conducted our first virtual visits with institutions here in Bahrain. Within the new normal, we have updated our qualification design, decided on the attendance. We make sure institutions, they need to clarify the attendance mode, whether on campus, online, or blended. At the beginning in Bahrain, institutions thought that they might do blended, but with the recent cases of COVID in Bahrain, we have stopped the blended and we went over total online delivery of education. Learning resources, here we make sure that there is a clear availability of ICT physical, and the support need to be done online and if blended exists. Measuring achievement, making sure that taking into account and the achievement of learning outcomes, the attendance and delivery mode. Feedback to learners, we actually concentrate in taking into account the program delivery and evidence of feedback given to given to learners. Design and integrity, making sure assessment, design of assessment is appropriate to the mode of delivery, because it's a different mode now. We have now, within the new normal, the mode is online delivery, so the assessment should be suitable. Security, what measures they have, even on risk and crisis management, which is a new standard, has been added with more clear evidence needed from the institution to ensure continuity and sustainability of institutions' operation during the new normal. Lesson learned from all this in terms of sustainability. Sustainability of learning is the core of education. By risk assessment and crisis management to ensure sustainability of education. Flexibility of learning is a must during the new normal. And what we have learned from our benchmarking, that creativity and innovation are the key solution when crises occur. And there is a need, all institutions, they need to have continuous review and refinement of policies and procedures to cope with the requirement of the current learning environment. Update regulation is a must to cater for the current situation of learning, and we are actually, as I mentioned, today we received actually a pass of a law to change, to update and to revisit our regulation of higher education in Bahrain. That was in a brief VQA.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shukran jazilan.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi. There are some questions on the chat box, and I have been taking note, but given the fact that time flies, would you have the energy to continue with the short presentation on Arab qualifications framework right away, and then we discuss the questions?
Excellent. That was my plan, actually.
Okay.
With Arab, I will do a brief, more brief presentation, okay, for the Arab qualification framework. At the beginning, that was actually a work done in 2012.
Dr. Al-Sindi, are you still online, connected?
Eduardo, I think he freezed.
Yes. Yes, this may happen, yeah, the problem of communication. So, can you check, can you keep checking if Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi is back or no, Erika?
Yes,
because
I will.
I'm sure you will try immediately to reconnect.
I think his connection broke and he isn't even connected now, but yeah, I think he's trying.
He's trying to come back, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let me then, while, can you keep track, Erika, as soon as he comes back?
Yes, 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 I will.
Okay. Yeah, so as you noticed, unfortunately, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, the speaker has...
Yeah.
Okay, he's reconnected. Excellent. Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, apology for this. I don't know what happened.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Good. So regarding, let me just move this at the beginning. Yeah, good. So regarding the countries, Bahrain, as I mentioned before, in Saudi Arabia, it is not yet operational while it's been developed in 2018. In United Arab Emirates, it has been operational since 2012. Kuwait, not yet developed. Oman, it's been operational since 2018. Qatar not yet operational, but the cabinet, they have approved it in 2019. Egypt not yet operational in approval, as I heard that it is with the cabinet of Prime Minister now, and it should be approved soon. And Dr. Johansson, she can correct me later. Jordan not yet operational, but it has been proposed. Tunisia, it is operational, and Morocco operational. These are the information I collected from our colleagues. The Arab qualification framework is a prescriptive, guided to develop national qualification, benefited from other regional and national framework. As I mentioned, it has been developed in 2012 by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates, Bahrain, and Oman. The AQF is considered to provide a single translational reference point to compare qualification nationally, regionally, and internationally, and to provide regional benchmark of qualified graduate defined in a common language, also to address the transparent mechanism to assure quality, rigor, and consistency of the regional for the country, employers, community, and stakeholders. Provide guidance in designing and developing new qualification. Also, it should provide instrument for demand expectation of qualification to sit on the same level. And when we developed it only for the higher education back in 2012. Purpose of AQF is to help students make informed decisions in higher education, serve as indicator for occupation, employment relevance, provide additional tools for the implementation of standard through quality assurance agencies, ministries, and other national bodies, indicate the outcome required from program courses, and the structure of AQF in terms of levels. It consists of knowledge, skills, and competencies. And in terms of the characteristics, it has start from 10 for the master, 10 for the doctorate, 9 for the master, 10 for the postgraduate, 7 for the bachelor, 6 for the higher diploma, 5 for the diploma, 4 for the entry to education. Keep in mind that when we have developed in 2012, we didn't have a qualification framework in Oman or in Bahrain. So we depended only on information gathered from Saudi Arabia, at that time, Egypt, if I remember, and Emirates. Qualification credit matrix, this is the matrix, okay, from the qualification, credit, minimum and the maximum, and then the minimum duration for the post-secondary in terms of schooling to reach the required qualification. In terms of the credit matrix for the qualification, if it's a professional degree, academic degree, general education, just for the higher, catering for the higher education. In terms of actually here, the comparability with an AQF, you can see that every qualification that we have, and if it's a bachelor, 6, 8 within Bahrain, 6 and 8 was the proposed. In 2012, we didn't have a qualification framework as yet, but it was just a proposal of the hierarchy of the framework. So this is just a comparison with the European qualification framework. Challenge to implement the regional qualification, different education system in the Arab region. As you know, in the Arab region, we have different systems and every system is different from the other. It's same thing, different regulations are some and even progression, and it will also going to provide mobility and opportunities when we have the Arab qualification framework operational. Not all Arab have established NQF, as I mentioned, especially in 2012, we had fewer than when we developed the Arab qualification framework, we had fewer countries with qualification framework. In fact, still, and some of them, they don't have a national system for quality assurance back in 2012. Implementation of the AQF requires intensive capacity building for all the stakeholders, and to overcome all these challenges, we require human and financial consideration. As I mentioned, different higher education and inconsistent regional framework of quality assurance networking between the quality assurance agencies, and the support of the new, and will also going to give support for the new agencies for the less developed countries in the Arab region. Capacity and also to provide capacity building for the external quality assurance agencies, and it will facilitate the exchange resources and the good practice, and it will also going to help in facing the cross-border accreditation mills. Since when we reference all the NQF, we will actually going to have a better recognition of a qualification and better mobility as well. Networking and partnership with the region, this will be one of changes, and also formal memorandum of understanding between members to adapt the outcome. That was in a brief, the Arab qualification framework. For more information, you can look at the study at ancohi.org. And as I mentioned before, that this study has been conducted in 2012. So, and until that time, it actually didn't been updated as yet. Okay, it is on our actually priority now to update the study, but as yet we did not update it since 2012. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, for this second presentation. I would like to then lead us already immediately to the session on questions and answers. And there are some questions addressed to your presentations. So we have now quite limited time for this session because we have a discussant, our discussant sharing his main views, impressions, takeaways from the 3 cases that were shared with us. And our discussant is Mr. Mamadou Sarr from Senegal. Mr. Mamadou Sarr is a professeur titulaire des universités. Il est enseignant-chercheur à la faculté de médecine, pharmacie et d'odontologie de l'université Cheikh Anta Diop de Dakar. Et il est aussi expert en assurance qualité du CAMES. Thank you very much, dear Mamadou. Vous pouvez donc partager vos principales impressions. Merci beaucoup. Essayez de rester assez synthétique dans vos impressions. Merci d'avance.
Try to be as succinct as possible. Thank you in advance. Good afternoon. Yes, I have the floor. Do you hear me? Yes, Mamadou, you can go on. Yes, thank you very much for allowing me. Thank you for having given me this opportunity to share with you. A kind of a synthesis of the qualifications, certifications, and also that of a Bahrain, Arab, and then the SADCs. I am indeed happy to be with you for this, and and so thank you. Someone's microphone was open, so I tried to summarize in order not to be too long. The 3 or 4 presentations that we have had in terms of the major lines, principles, objectives, and methodologies that were largely tackled during this session, but equally in terms of the requirements, the challenges, opportunities, and the standards and indicators. and also in terms of the certifications, but equally the systems and the mechanisms of implementation and the procedures in the context of these certifications and qualifications. For the major lines, we can agree, I believe, that there's the need to define policies or orientation frameworks that are regional. A lot of the regional ones were presented, but also for the national. There are options and strategic choices that one had to take into account, particularly the issue of anchorage and self-reliance, national self-reliance, and also the subdivision in the continental towards the regional, because in the context of ACQF, but in the regional towards the national as well. But then the integration of regional blocks for the regional economics as well, because all these aspects come together. We've seen that there are a lot of blocks, especially the Arab blocks and then the economic blocks, because this is the opportunity to talk about what we have by way of experience. And I think Kames has understood the stakes of the harmonization and the integration of a system of higher education in terms of research, and this facilitates internationalization of the program, but equally what enables the system of acknowledgement and system of qualifications. And also before the Arusha Convention of 1981, which became the, and also we look at the program for the acknowledgement since 1972. That means that the expertise has been there, and the dynamics of following the setting up of qualifications programs was more on riveted on higher education. Now it has gone into the assessment of skills and the evaluation of programs of learning programs, and then a lot of aggregations and the rest. And so there are a lot of experiences in benchmarking and bench learning, and networking is possible to look at the experiences in the regional blocks and the economic regions, because we have in Africa CEMAC, we have WEMO and ECOWAS, etc., etc. So what are the final objectives or what are the end results? Because what has been done in the Bahrain and the rest helps in joining and merging, looking at the qualifications and the issue of transparencies and the values, and the issue of consistency of the paths for training, and the issue of a transfer of credits and of a progress, etc. I think at this level, all the experiences that have been presented have the same source in terms of their objectives. A lot of requirements will have to look at it and the characteristics of these principles. Requirements for the response to the academic and professional qualifications, and then this is clear between what we have in the qualifications and the professional side, alignment with the foreign certifications, and equally the other frameworks at the international level. Then the principles of the design of the qualifications frameworks was well presented by Lesotho, which showed that we are in a paradigm based on learning outcomes and professional goals. Particularly the issue of nomenclature of the kit was well mentioned, even though the example of Lesotho showed a certain amount of rigidity, because the certifications were much more interested in up to the level 5, but then what we say is rather what we need is from level 6 to 10, with a shorter cycles of diploma courses, which looks at the subdivisions of higher education. We should be inspired more of the Bahrain model, which is more interested and not circumscribing the certifications only up to level 5, even though that is shared, to look at the dimensions of regulation in particular of higher learning in terms of massification in the one space, and also to look at the cycle of diploma awards, and also to look at the issue of massification. I think the rules of the subdivisions have been shared, at the national and international levels, and also mentioning the aims and objectives of qualification, alignment on the national context, because we should be able to respond to the national policies of higher education before we move on to the issue of regionalization and internationalization. I think the issue of alignment will have to be well taken into account in the context of a harmonization in our academic context. It is very important to proceed to regionalization and international acknowledgement and on to the and to that. And also the mapping of the profile of learners is also well remarked. It's important to guarantee the outcomes of learnings. We look at the prerequisites of the learners so as to be able to orient them and to accompany them. I think there are some descriptors on the methodologies of formulations that are highly consultative. I think the lessons that the development of the qualifications framework is a process that is highly consultative. I think we should take that into account when we look at the methodology of the calculations and awards. We didn't look at the consensus. We worked for ECOWAS and we tried to harmonize the Francophone and the Anglophone world in terms of LMD. And then somewhere it is this mark, somewhere in other places the other mark. But in context of ACQF is to try to mainstream or integrate the methodologies for the calculations. I think we agreed, and all the experiences have shown it, that we necessarily need mechanisms for reviews or updates in this qualifications framework for qualifications, with a kind of evolution and adaptability by always looking at the working context. That's a bit on the first point, on the major lines. And also for the requirements, there are many. We should integrate all the sub-frameworks that exist in the countries at the regional level, the academic, professional, and elementary to the higher education. We should take the integrated framework. Then the example of a Bahrain has also been shown. We need an integrated framework. We should indeed reflect on these mechanisms for the certification. Look at the classical one, Minister of National Education, Minister of Higher Education, and other ministries that are certificates, like health sector, and I think handicraft, trade and industry. We should open it up so that we take into account other dimensions of certifications and to give a place to other organizations and authorities. In addition to higher education, we have consular chambers and the like. And so what is the academic value of this? I think the framework enables the definition of the academic value that we give into our certifications, but also the professional values of our certifications, and also the professional orientation and academic. I think there is the equilibrium or balance there that should be well demonstrated in the process of evaluation and a guarantee for the quality of our training. And also for the strong requirement is to enable the learners to demonstrate their capability to prove their knowledge and their skills in professional implementations, and also not to do evaluations on table that do not guarantee the learning acquisitions. And so all the experiences presented, we can lay emphasis on new descriptors by looking at the criteria of evaluation of quality. I think we can look at the level descriptors and the criteria for your assessment so as to avoid having juxtaposed systems, quality assurance on the one hand, development of curriculum on the other. There's a need for us to see in what way we can align these new criteria and in the descriptors. What is the alignment that we should operate? I think that was mentioned with the level descriptors and also the mechanisms for the transfer of credits, an issue that was indeed mentioned. But equally, the level descriptors and the reference criteria, we should look at the issue of referencing and also the quality and the transfer of credits that also require the link between these descriptors and these items that I've mentioned. We need the example that have been shown to us. First, it was the French example, and there's a need to redefine our study references, and also we have to adapt. And also, this is also going to bring in new skills. The trades or professions for which we are training our people are obsolete because the skills that accompany them are evolving, and then immediately they become obsolete. And so, permanently, we should define the references on the skills which enable us to define this, but also to define the evaluation references, which end up in certification references. I think looking at these requirements, challenges, opportunities, and standards, there are a lot, and indicators, there are a lot of elements on which the continental framework will have to harmonize this block. The third part is the systems and the mechanisms of implementation and procedures. And on the procedures, I think there's a lot of sources that have been mentioned, and there are challenges to overcome. I think challenge in the Arab context, it was mentioned, and the deficit of the harmonization of the framework, the challenge for the regulatory framework and the legislative framework. It is interesting to see how we could bring to that these regulatory and administrative frameworks, and the challenge of human resources which accompany this, because we would have defined our frameworks well, but we don't have human resources or the qualified human resources to support that. And also the challenge of funding. We have our finance, we have the way of working in regional economic blocks, but then we should work at this. A lot of experts, but then we do not represent all, but it is much larger. And I think if we should look at the scaling up, we should look at the mass of the higher education and the continental and the regional frameworks that are more not moving. We need a challenge of capacity building and then to scale up, which is very important. In this system of implementation, I think we can retain the mechanisms of accumulation and credit transfer that was mentioned in all, and the acknowledgement of learning outcomes or what is acquired. It's important. Then acknowledging skills is very important. Then portability of skills, we should keep them throughout our lives so that we have the whole training throughout our lives. And then the issue of a professional transition, we cannot just be in a particular working post for one's whole life. We should look at the dimensions of the portability and the professional transition. The issue of the capacities of the learners, I'll explain. I think as of today, we should endow the learners blocks of skills that can be subdivided. We cannot say that we can do licensing for or employment. We should rather learn to be able to subdivide the blocks of skills on which we should insist a lot more, and to get the possibility each time that there's the need for one to be able to migrate to a new sector of activities, what we call the capacities of learners. The issue of training and the issue of the didactic engineering, and also for the profiling of the learners, but to take into account all the dimensions and the didactic processes. It is very important to do internships also to be able to guarantee qualifications and the qualifications, and then also the didactic alignment also. We should look at that, the methodological alignment. We should look at what one has acquired, and then the professional qualifications. Then looking at what has been mentioned, that was very good. The issue of stagnification, but then of internship, and it's alternating between the academic world and the professional world. It is the need to take into account this dimension for us to take into account the cycle of diploma awards, and also with the possibility of going out to work, come back to train, go out to work and come back to train. That is the kind of alternation. Then the issue of continuous development, professional development, or long life learning, and then validation of qualification, the criteria for referencing qualifications. So what criteria are we going to be based this on to reference them? Validation of outcomes of experience of formal and non-formal learning, accreditation of programs, standards and norms to classification have all been mentioned. I think we've mentioned all that has been able to done, but which was blocked by COVID, and which had required a plan for a response. And often we were confronted in the first place by continuity of our activity, which is much more pedagogic. This continuity in the COVID context would be to indeed to digitalize information. And then there's been a plan to resume activities with still a residual epidemic. But then we were able to do that on strict health standards. But the dimensions that we did not take into account is the dimension of the risk management, because our institutions will look at the possibility of functioning on a degraded model. If there are troubles and pandemics, we can continue in a professional way, because no one knew. We did not take into account the dimensions of taking the risk that the Arab world, that the Arab framework has actually developed risk management. We should be able to function no matter the disturbances in the system, and to be able to guarantee a system that helps us to continue. I think the standards in this is to be able to prioritize learning as much as it is possible, subject to guaranteeing collectivity, which is a huge problem in our developing countries, and to try to operate resumptions that are physical and organized, and also for gradual academic resumptions that are progressive. These are the learnings that I have been able to draw from these experiences that have enriched me a lot, and that have given me this inspiration to share these experiences with you. I thank you. I hope I was not too long. I wanted to develop a lot more things, but time would not allow me. I think on other occasions I'll have the chance of doing that. And thank you, Madam Chair Eduarda, for having given me this opportunity to do this summary of the learnings we've had from this. And then so thank you very much, Prof. Mamadou Sarr. I think I did well by proposing you to do this summary, which is well thought out. You have added a lot of elements of links and values, which are very, very interesting for the continuation of the reflection, particularly the link between the various types of regions and the continent. Thank you very much. We will now move on to very, very fast because the time is going very fast to some answers from our contributors.
Actually, I should one day speak completely in French, another day completely in Portuguese, because these are also languages of the African Union. So we have a couple of questions from some participants in the chat box addressed to our speakers. And we don't have a lot of time, yes, but let us still try. And some of the questions are addressed to Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi. And also, of course, also to Mr. Kobotlo. And so the question already addressed to Mr. Kobotlo regarding the standards of quality assurance of ODL. He already started sharing his reply, his reflection on this. But then there are even more inputs in the chat box about this. So there is, for example, again from Senegal, from ACQF, Monsieur Cissé. He is asking about exactly about quality assurance of distance learning. And he mentions that in Senegal there is a distance learning university, and their programs and qualifications are accredited by the ACQF, which is the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education in Senegal. It seems that this is a very important question, of course, And I don't know if also Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, would you like to add anything related with this point, so quality assurance of online learning, since you have also been working in this area? And let me already advance then another question, and this question comes from France. So our colleague, Madame Brigitte Bouquet, who has done the presentation on the French National Qualifications Framework last time, is here again with us. Thanks for coming. Merci bien. And she's asking, how exactly do you define, for example, in the case of Bahrain and also Lesotho, non-formal and informal learning? So is it a concept embedded in the education and training system? Is this something else? So the question of non-formal and informal learning that is becoming more and more important also thanks, let's say, to the COVID-19 new normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these would be two questions immediately if possible. If you can, maybe Mr. Kobotlo, would you like to start with a brief input or on any of these two questions? Particularly on non-formal and informal learning, since you have already replied to the question on quality standards for ODL. Or maybe Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, would you like then to say a few words about the two of them?
All right. If I can talk about the informal and non-formal, it is not yet recognized, actually. Not yet. We only recognize the formal learning. But as I mentioned before, thanks to COVID-19, people are thinking now, and they are starting, to revisit the regulation, because it's time that we have to recognize the online delivery, MOOCs and etc. Because I mean, what we have now from COVID, as a higher education, I cannot deliver only a bachelor degree having a student sitting with Zoom. I have one of my sons, actually, I mean, when actually I open the door, I see him just looking at Zoom and following his professor. I don't think he will concentrate all the time. So what now, the new learning, the new normal, we have to complement it with micro-credential, small chunks of learning. The micro credential is very important, but unfortunately, quality assurance agencies, they don't recognize micro credentials. It's time that we have to place the micro credentials and we have to recognize its delivery. The micro credential will complement our formal education. So what I can do for my son, for example, I can ask him to have 70% of his studies through Zoom, 30% by him to go to Coursera and register for those micro-credential courses. Of course, he's be given by the name of those small chunks of learning. So complement the learning, because this situation, the new normal, I think it will stay a couple of years. So we have to make sure that our education system is as is, not change. Small kids will not going to learn now from their teachers, because you have to sit with them, especially grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. So we need to teach them through games, through playing. Back to your questions, formal learning is being recognized, but right now, most of the governments in the Arab countries are going now to recognize the informal and the non-formal, because soon it will be a must. How it will be recognized? Through clear procedures, through clear policies. Okay, like for example, I can have an exemption for anybody who has an experience, and for those who are going to finish their qualification. I'm going to have now certificates of learners conduct all their degrees online. So I need to recognize his or her certificate soon.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi. There are more questions on the chat box.
Yeah, I have seen one question regarding the requirement. Do you want me to answer it?
Yes, please.
Yes. One of the questions is that the PhD, it's not 2 years. No. I mean, maybe maybe he misinterpreted the slides. What we have in the slides, we mentioned the degree, whether it is a PhD. PhD should be minimum 3 years, but the requirement in 2012, when we developed the Arab qualification framework, we went over the countries and we have seen that in order for the students to get into PhD, he needs, in order for his diploma to be validated, he needs to have a master's degree or he needs to have a level 8 qualification, which is a bachelor degree or equivalent. So it's not a 2 years PhD, no. PhD should be minimum of 3 years of study.
Thank you, thank you very much. I wonder whether any participant has still a question pending. Well, there was a question again from Senegal about the passerelle fluide entre les différentes formes d'éducation, par quel moyen? So also addressed to you, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi. So the pathways, fluid pathways between the different forms of education. How are you dealing with this, and what is the main tool or instrument that you use to guarantee fluid pathways? If you would like just to add a final reply on this. This is a question from Senegal. And we will then go on to the next session. No? Okay. I'm not sure if Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi is
yes.
Yes.
Can you repeat your question? I couldn't hear.
Yes. So the question is from Senegal also, and is the following: how do you make pathways fluid between different forms of education and training, different modalities? Which is the main tool, instrument, or policy that you use to guarantee fluid pathways, connections between different forms of education and training?
Right. Actually, as I mentioned, unfortunately to say that in Bahrain, I mean, there is a wall between education and training, between higher education and vocational. We bought all the hammers in the market to try to demolish this wall since we started. But thanks God to COVID-19, I think it's time to demolish this wall and to have a kind of transfer of credit between vocational and higher education. When we revisit soon our higher education law, we are going to remove this wall between the higher education and vocational. So right now, it is impossible to transfer credit between higher education and vocational. But let us hope soon we will have this pathway of articulation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this response, and also thanks for the question from Senegal, from Mr. Cissé. So thanks very much, participants and speakers, for this very good, extremely rich interaction and reflection. And I would like then just to invite us to do a very final exercise. As always, we do this Mentimeter exercise, and my colleague Erika is going to post. Yes, you have the Zoom. You have in the Zoom chat a link, and this link goes directly to the Mentimeter that we have prepared today for you. the Mentimeter exercise. And we have then, as always, these not at all complicated questions. So, are you all seeing the Mentimeter?
Can I share my screen then?
I'm not sure if you are seeing it. Are you did you manage already to get in that link? I can also share my screen, so just to very briefly show the kind of questions we have today. Okay, so these are we have then 3 questions. So the first question is very simple, but just very important always to understand better what NQFs are. Which are the main objectives of Lesotho qualifications framework? So you can write up to 4 words or expressions. And so this is the first question. The second question is, what is common between LQF and BQF? And there you also have 5 possibilities, and you have to choose 3 out of these 5. What is common between Lesotho qualifications framework and Bahrain qualifications framework? So this is just the presentation for you to see a bit better the questions and the possible responses, replies that you can, here you can choose up to 3. Now, question 3. The question 3 is very much oriented to the COVID responses as outlined in the BQF presentation. And the question to you is, can you choose 3 that would better fit into your context? 3 out of the 5, you remember there was a slide with main lessons learned. So 3 out of these 5, which are the ones that better suit your context in your countries and institutions? And so this was just to introduce briefly the main questions we propose for today. One question in which you just write words, expressions, which are the main objectives of Lesotho qualifications framework. The other one, question 2 and question 3 are multiple choice questions. One about the similarities of the 2 national qualifications frameworks presented today from 2 completely different contexts and continents, but they have similarities. And the third question is, so from the COVID responses, what are the 3, let's say up to 3 that better suit your context? And then I would like just to ask my colleague Erika to start sharing the screen of Mentimeter. I hope you have all managed to get in the exercise. And Erika, you can start showing the first question. And colleagues, you can start writing your main, what is it that you retained from the main objectives of Lesotho qualifications framework. Very important objectives were presented today by Mr. Kobotlo. I'm not participating, so I'm not influencing. You can just click in the link that is shared in the chat box. Just click and you go directly to the questions. You can also write expressions, for example, equity and redress, whatever you consider important. Barriers. Referencing. integrate. I see also RPL is there. Quality. Parity of esteem, that's great. Integração. Alinhamento. I like to see the words written also in Portuguese. Qualidade. Okay. Mr. Kobotlo, are you happy with the replies of your peers, your colleagues?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
I'm very happy having a look at the way responses are coming through.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, if you want to add still some additional replies to this first question on Lesotho qualifications framework, the main objectives that were today described and presented very well by our colleague, Mr. Kopotlo. We are so grateful that high-level representatives from the various national institutions in charge of national qualifications framework accept to come share this knowledge, this in-depth reflection. We are really very, very grateful, and it's a very rare opportunity to have you all, knowing that you are all very busy. Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Kobotlo. So you can take a screenshot of how colleagues in this peer learning activity have understood the objectives of the LQF, and we want to wish you success in the implementation now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really a very excellent presentation. Everyone congratulated you. Thank you. So now we can move to the next question. Yeah, the next question is about the common features between LQF and BQF. So I will read, so just to be, so the options we have there are both NQFs have 10 levels. That's an easy question. Then another is both are integrated, all subsectors, higher education, TVET, general. Another option is both use credit transfer and accumulation systems. Then there comes another option, number 4, saying that they do not apply RPL. None of them uses a system of RPL or validation des acquis de l'expérience. And then the last option is both NQFs were approved in 2019. So please vote for the options you consider are common, really common between the two. Oh. Okay. Thank you. We have 12 responses. Anyone else wants to add? Thanks. So I think, what do you think, Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi? Is this more or less good as a picture of learning outcomes, let's say, on the common on the common characteristics, let's say those that are really where similarities exist between the two NQFs from different contexts and different continents, and they have common features.
Yes.
And what do you think?
Yes, more or less are the same. I mean, they don't apply Okay, more or less number, well, the first and second and third, yes,
they are correct.
They are correct, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much. You passed very well, both of you, Mr. Kobotlo and Dr. Tariq Al-Sindi, your message today. It reached well, thank you. And now I think we can go to the third question. Thank you. And this is about COVID-19 response. And so we have here the various lessons learned in the case of BQA from the COVID-19 response. So the question here, you might recall the slide that was presented, one of the last slides, maybe, yes, the last slide, lessons learned. So the first option is sustainability of learning is key. So risk and crisis management is fundamental. The second slide is flexibility of learning. Things have to change. Then creativity, innovation, and motivation are key solutions when crises occur. Is this important? I see. Review and refine policies and procedures to adapt to the new situation, and update NQF standards to adapt to the new situation. Okay, there is a very good spread of opinions. So different participants are taking on board, for example, the first lesson, sustainability of learning is key. So this is fundamental. There are 8 votes for that. There are also 8 votes for reviewing and refining policies and procedures to adapt to the new situation. Interesting. Flexibility of learning, of course, yes. This is why we were discussing about ODL, and creativity, innovation, and motivation are key solutions when crises occur. And interestingly, the option with less votes is the one that concerns the update of NQF standards. Thank you. If anyone else would like to vote still. Well, at this stage, I would like, if possible, to ask Professor Zvimbo from Zimbabwe to say just 2 or 3 words about the fact that COVID now has found a space in these peer learning webinars. You were one of the most, let's say, strong supporters of using also these webinars to discuss a little bit responses and the place of NQFs in this response to COVID crisis. Would you like to say a few words? But Professor Zvimbo Kuzvineca, Peter.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, I think the COVID-19 pandemic, in my view, presents both opportunities and disadvantages for all of us as far as either it is the NQF or what we do on a daily basis. Because I think it has enabled those of us who are conservative and those of us that were afraid to actually move and make use of the affordances of ICTs. These webinars are a classic example, because if there was no COVID, we wouldn't be traveling this often to go to wherever it is, whether it is Senegal, Johannesburg, or Dakar. But because of COVID, for us, the new normal is becoming very, very normal for us. So that's what I really just wanted to say in 5 minutes. But to thank all the presenters. Even dinosaurs like some of us, we continue to learn on a daily basis as we listen to these excellent presentations and what is happening in different countries. So, merci beaucoup, muito obrigada. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Professor Zvimbo. It's really a pleasure, and thanks for always saying obrigada. Oh, thank you. Good that you now appeared. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have tried to follow really your very strong recommendation done at the second webinar that COVID has to be present in this discussion. And okay, so there was a question exactly done by professors, written by Professor Zwimbo in the chat. Is there a colleague from Sierra Leone present? And I think there is. Please, could you, yes, very good, yes. Please, you have the possibility to say just one or two words, and if you want to continue the conversation, you can also just write in the chat box your email if you like. Please,
okay,
representative colleague from Sierra Leone, would you like to say a word to finalize? What are you taking away from this webinar and the previous one? You were the one who asked, how long does it take to develop an NQF? How can this process, this pace be, let's say, accelerated? The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Mohamed Diallo, Director, National Council for Technical Vocational Awards. We are also hosting a committee that was set up by the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education to work on the NQF. You know, in this room, we are 7. We are 7 right now participating in this webinar. And the number has been like that since the beginning. Okay. We are very much thankful to you for giving us this opportunity. We are learning a lot. And I am particularly pleased with the Bahrain presentation because we are grappling with similar structures here as to where we will put the NQF. So we want to thank you very much. And next time we will participate very actively in the chat box. We want you to give us an opportunity at some point to present the 0 things we have. So that, to present our status and to see where we want to go, what our thinkings are, so that you could make a critique of us. Lastly, we want to identify 1 or 2 people with whom we will be disturbing with our questions outside this webinar. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Sierra Leone and for your commitment and for gathering all your department colleagues and the committee to participate in these discussions and for coming forward with also this proposal to speak about your own experience and the steps you are undertaken. And we will really be very, very pleased to have you. Probably not at the next webinar that is planned for the 8th of October, but the next on the 22nd, if that would be okay with you. We will be in touch. I think you have our contact, so you can send us any question, proposal, and if you want, you can also write in the chat box your email so that we are sure we have your contact, name and email, please. Professor Zwimbo, are you okay? Do you want to ask a question to Sierra Leone? If not, we can start closing the webinar.
No, thank you. I've sent you my email address, so we can exchange outside this this thing.
Okay.
Which is everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I do. Fiery voice, yeah.
I'm glad for you see you there now this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so will you talk, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
I also write there my email so that you can contact us.
Yes,
please.
I will do.
Okay, Mr. Mohamed Jallo. I think we are now.
Thank you very much.
We had, I think, an excellent, very, very rich, informative, and also, I think, pleasant interactions webinar. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And I should say, I would like to say that today we have with us Benin. Benin has not been often present, but I'm so glad that Benin came. And then we always have a number of participants who are always present with us. And one of them is Tunisia, La Tunisie. I also want to thank Tunisie very much for being un participant très fidèle, toujours de tous les webinars. So thank you so much. And Angola, let me also underline Angola. Angola is very active. They are working hard to develop and move forward with their national qualifications framework within the national qualification system. And this is why Ana Claudia is always bringing also a number of colleagues to be together and discuss, learn from all these experiences. And Angola will be presenting next time. So next time we will have the presentations of completely different countries on the continent. So starting with Angola, we will also have Ghana, Egypt, and Zimbabwe. So it will be on the 8th of October, same time, in 2 weeks then. This was a brilliant webinar. Thank you so much. I feel myself really happy and enriched from all these interactions. And yeah, we will try to take on board your recommendations, Professor Sarr, Monsieur Mamadou Sarr, about capacity building. Really, it's a fundamental point. Thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe, stay well. And now we can all open the cameras. Let's make a picture, everybody, together.
Okay.
A screenshot. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mozambique, Angola. Thank you. I see Le Cames is always present with us. South Africa, São Tomé e Príncipe, Le Senegal. And then we have, of course, we also have from Austria, the Ministry of Education, Mr. Reinhard Neubauer with us, and from the European Commission, European Qualifications Framework Advisory Group, so the representative of the skills, the unit skills and qualifications, Dennis, is also often now with us. It's excellent. Thank you so much. And of course, I wanted just to say also thank you very much, Mrs. Jahufal. She is an excellent participant always. She has been a little bit away, but now she's with us again. Thank you for coming. I hope we will stay together. And a big thank you also, James Joey, from representing EAC, East Africa Community. James will also be doing a presentation on the qualifications framework of East Africa Community, and this will be on the 22nd of October. In advance, thank you very much for this, James, and we are really happy to see you. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Le Maroc. Goodbye. I want to see you always with us, Maroc. Everybody, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right.
Martha.
Very much.
Thank you for your. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Ismael also. Thank you.
Ok, bye-bye.
Bye. Obrigada, Ida, por ter...
Ok, obrigada a nós.
Não pode abandonar, tem que estar sempre conosco. Mamadou, Mamadou, vous avez vraiment fait honneur.
Merci, Edouard.